Hi, my name is Kevin, and I collect old irons. I've long had a weakness for the sad iron heaters, and we've talked about some of these before, but I've picked up some new ones that I want to talk about here. We have done several videos on the sad iron heaters, those heated on a wood stove, a kerosene stove, or a natural gas stove, and the heaters for each of those groups are different. Our kerosene stoves and the sad iron heaters, I love them, is one of our most watched videos, which is saying something, and also says that there's a lot of kerosene stove collectors out there. Those videos were quite some time ago. In the meantime, we picked up a number of more heaters, some of these being quite unusual, and let's talk about these. I got a heads up from one of my viewers in Ohio about a sad iron heater, and I bought it, and this one is extremely unusual. What it is actually it's made out of two pieces. They're screwed together. I'm going to take these apart and we'll look at the two pieces individually. The top has 5 flat areas for the irons to come in this way, pointed down, so much different than the pyramidal design that's much more typical. And the bottom is a just cylindrical design, so this is maybe for a wood stove, maybe for natural gas stoves. Some of the natural gas stoves were round in shape. And the top, reason we're taking this apart is to show the markings on the bottom. This is a Griswald Manufacturing Company sad iron heater, and I should tell you the markings here are incised into the mold rather than in relief, which would be the more typical. This is probably a prototype. We've inquired with some of the Griswald collectors out there. It's not in any of the books. No one's ever heard of one of these. And my guess is that they made these as an idea and very quickly found a very obvious flaw once you start trying to use that, and that is if you're going to be heating these irons, the front of the handles all get tangled up with one another. It's very congested down there, and shows you why the pyramid heaters are so much better. So this is probably a prototype. Presumably they made a few of them, but never sold them commercially. It does not have any Griswold numbers. I guess one question we have to ask is, what might the value be? And that is a good question, but let us keep in mind that just being rare does not necessarily suggest great value. Most Griswold collectors are collecting the skillets, collecting the pans, things that they can hang on walls. They really have very little interest in the sad irons made by Griswold. There were a few, and I don't think they have much interest in sad iron heaters as well, and that would diminish the value. I paid several $100s for this. I think I bought this right, and I paid a good, decent, reasonable price. So here is a pyramid heater, and the pyramid heaters made of cast iron are quite common, made by many companies, but this one's different. This is not made out of cast iron. This is made out of pressed steel. Several pieces riveted together. There are several pieces across the top and a piece on the bottom as well. And there is a cover, also made of steel. Nice little lifting mechanism here. These are made in pieces and then riveted together, held together by the piece on top. My guess is if a lot of these sold, most of them did not survive. They don't look like they could take a lot of wear and tear. The cover here is a little unusual for the heating devices in that this is used to help retain the heat. Again, the irons would be here. No markings. And speaking of covers, this is something that's quite unusual. This is the Victor sad iron cover, patent applied for. I have not seen the patent. And this presumably would have been used on a wood stove, and it's used for where we heat our things on the wood stove. I've only seen 2 of these. This is in exceptional condition. It's got a lot of ornamentation on it, some flower patterns, a couple of wreaths, and so forth. Very unusual piece. Now there's a reason why we're doing this large table here, because we've got some pretty large devices. This is a kerosene heater. We actually showed this in our kerosene video, and to remind you, I had bought this. This is an interesting, in the top, it has 3 overlapping circles, and I have seen pictures of the heater that would have fit into this, so I saw this on eBay and bought it so I would have it if I ever saw the appropriate heater. And I found one. Here it is. Same kind of 3 overlapping rings. The pieces here allow you to lift this so you can get to put the irons in. It is the JMB Davidson and Company, Albany, New York, patented October 18th, 1864. I have found the patent, but the patent is for the stove, not for the sat iron heater. And as you may have noticed, these don't fit. Plainly, this company, I know nothing about the company or the variety of these things. I'm curious to hear from somebody who might know more about this, but these came in smaller, maybe mid, maybe larger sizes. I also think there probably were multiple tops to it. You might have a flat top for cooking a soup and a couple of cups of tea or something like that, and then you can switch that out and switch in your sat iron heater, maybe some other specialty devices. So I have a small stove that doesn't have the equivalent small heating device, and I have a large heating device without the stove. If there's anybody out there that has the other half of the piece needed here, write me and we'll get these things together as they should be, one way or the other. So let's talk about some definite kerosene stove heaters. This is called the Royal 1890. There were several companies that used the Royal name. They must have been unrelated. One was a gasoline company associated with Monitor, 1920s, and another was a machine fluider company from the 1880s. So this has space for 2 flat irons. You put them in here. It was sat upon a kerosene stove with 3 heaters, three wicks. There we are. Let's go ahead and we'll put the 2 irons in here as well. As you can see, this particular heater needs some minor attention, cleaning up, and we do plan to talk about your care and feeding of your old iron collection pieces in a later video. Let's take a look at a couple of natural gas heaters. Again, the natural gas comes from an external source. The hose fixes here, and you'd have some flames coming out of here. This is the Enterprise Manufacturers Philadelphia, USA Sad Iron Heater number 1. They might have had more than one. And this is just right to fit a fairly large size Enterprise Mrs. Potts iron. And I found a trade card for this Sad Iron heater. As you might remember from previous videos, Enterprise loved trade cards, and the golden age of trade cards more or less ended by the very early 1890s, so I think these things were probably marketed in the late 1880s into the 1890s. Now here's again something that's very unusual. This piece here is not that unusual. It's uncommon but not quite rare, and I think what was done here was that you would take the natural gas and you'd put the nozzle right up in there. Maybe you'd have a little separate stand here, and that would heat the iron, and then you can put the iron over here while you're heating another. But here is the more developed device. This one here is not marked, has no markings. This one has fairly elaborate markings. It's the C.M. Kemp Manufacturing Company, Baltimore, Maryland. Patent applied for on the housing, and keep in mind this does not have the cover. The cover is on this. And on the stand here is C.M. Kemp Manufacturing Company, Baltimore, Maryland, patented November 29th, 1910. I have dug up the patent, and the patent is for a carbureting device. The way I think this was used was that you had an external gasoline tank. This put gasoline through here, and this device here then vaporized it, and that has a top sort of similar to this, and that would heat your iron, which again would be in here. And now for something, as they say on Monty Python, completely different. Check this bad boy. This is a gasoline stove. Actually, it's a pressurized gasoline stove. It's the pump here for pressurizing. And it's made by the Quick Meal Stove Company. The Quick Meal Stove Company was based in Missouri, Chicago, and apparently some other places as well. It made very elaborate stoves out of steel, not cast iron. The steel sometimes galvanized, oftentimes enameled. The stoves could oftentimes use multiple sources of energy, and this is for a stove and an oven and other devices I think as well. The company was in business to the 1930s, and they made this sad iron heater. So what we've seen thus far is 7, pretty much every one of them quite unusual sad iron heaters. I'm going to finish this off with 2 very common types, and types that don't actually have a sad iron shape integrated into the design. They're called sad iron heaters, but they're obviously not explicitly for sad irons. This is a little gasoline stove. This one has no markings on it. There are many of these. You could collect these explicitly and probably fill your house. A lot of them in Europe, in some of them marked profusely with interesting design elements. I got this in a box lot and decided that would represent that. And then this is also called a sad iron heater, and many of the cast iron companies that might have done a little bit of sad irons on the side probably did one of these as well. Oftentimes they're called sad iron heaters. This is from the Landers and Foy, patent applied for, but there are, you can see examples of these in the Wapuk catalog or in the Griswald catalog and lots of other places. These would probably sit on a stove, perhaps on a kerosene stove, wood stove or kerosene stove. And I just don't collect these. Again, I just sort of picked this one up, and having this one here, I thought, well, okay, now I've got that one covered. But you can probably, there must be 15 or 20 different companies and different designs and shapes. And with that, I am hoping to do a laundry stove video sometime down the way. I've only got 4 laundry stoves now, and so I have to either pick up a couple of more or get some photographs from somebody else. And we have a lot more coming on, keeping in mind we're also now doing short videos. Those are videos less than a minute, and it turns out they're only posted for a day or so, but some of them make 1,000 views in a day. So keep watching, subscribe, send your comments and so forth, and we'll keep working on these.